All right, well, I want to start out by saying thank you for joining us today. We've got a great discussion coming up about the future of housing construction. This is our third webinar in a series of three that focus on the future of housing construction. As we know, the demand for housing in the US today far exceeds the industry's ability to supply it the way that it's being supplied now. So we know that factory-built housing will take hold here in the US, and factories will be highly automated. And we've got a great group of experts here to talk about that. I'm Sammy Birch, the marketing manager here at Mission. I'll be moderating the discussion. Today, we're joined by Will Beecher, the CEO and co-founder of Periscope Homes, as well as Jason Mendez, the co-founder of Periscope Homes as well. From the Mission side, we've got Ryan Lillibridge, our Director of Business Development, Breton Leach, our industrial specialist and technical sales, and Scott Lindeman, our CEO. I'm going to hand it over to you, Will Beecher. Can you tell us a little bit about Periscope Homes and what you guys are doing out there?
Absolutely. Thanks, Sammy. We are Periscope Homes. We are making the best way for homeowners to add living space. We've identified two must-haves: our choice in the customer's experience and ease. The back end that supports the experience of choice and ease is one where we're reapplying so much of what we developed at Tesla, where Jason and I were working together for over a decade to go from very manual kind of craft work processes on lab benches to build the first chopped up Lotus Elises into Roadster prototypes, all the way to the high level of automation that we saw in S, X, and higher still in Model 3. The subject matter is one of a product. Today, buildings as a rule are not built at the level of digital design detail that all the other things we interact with in our lives are built, whether it's the laptops we're speaking on or the desks they're sitting on. The process of defining in digital, running through a factory, and ending with logistics is disparate from homes. And that's what we're driving a lot of innovation on, to dramatically increase the productivity with which homes are made, which drives down the cost and increases the accessibility.
To add to what Will just said, I can't remember where I heard this analogy, but it really stuck with me, especially because I'm in the process of kind of midway through the custom home process, which is both delightful and terrifying at the same time. But someone compared the construction industry, residential construction industry, to as if you ordered a Honda, and Honda said, okay, in a year, we're going to show up on your driveway and we'll put the car together there. Talk to you then. and that was just like, it really struck me as such an apropos analogy. And that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to build the Honda, design the Honda first and build it in a factory, whether ours or a combination of ours and our suppliers, which is usually how it goes, and then show up and assemble the home rather than build it with all of that supply chain converging at the property rather than more efficiently and earlier at suppliers and factories.
Yeah, can I offer, I think that's a similar mindset, Jason. There's a wide gamut of things when we say home construction, all the way from the artisan model, fully custom, built on site with craftsmen, to trailers and RVs, and everything in between. And the recent interactions with more modular and construction of prefab modular multifamilies and into the ADU units. And how do you break the problem down and prioritize to get started to change an entire industry? How do you decide where to start?
Mm-hmm. To build the business, first is to find the right market to debut in. And we're ecstatic to be working in the California ADU market, the accessory dwelling unit market, where urban and suburban infill opportunities exist in tons of people's backyards. Demand is sky high right now. You could say ADU is, since California legislation streamlined the regulation process, it's oversubscribed on customer demand compared to contractors and small businesses' ability to fulfill the demand. Demonstrate traction, that is, go out and speak to prospective customers, find out what they need, find out what they're valuing, get some orders in place, build that traction that's demonstrative of our product proposal fitting that market demand. In a technical capacity, complementing the business one, finding the right value add unit to send to the field has been really critical at Periscope and has us arrive at panelized construction, as well as MEP subassemblies that are approximately the size 1 or 2 people can carry. We're finding that that's really valuable to get to folks' backyards without a crane, walking through that pathway to the backyard, going through the garage when need be. And it's also really beneficial in logistics costs, where a pitfall that is possible and is being realized in some modular efforts where entire volumes are shipped, say wide load tractor trailers, crane at site, can create a kind of service area index around a single factory that can be projects which pencil out. That is to say, from the terminology of the construction industry, to pencil out is to be able to make money. To have a really broad service area, we're finding flat pack is really rocket fuel to the business.
And Will, I think it's really important for you to inject here how, which you already touched on earlier, customer choice and design aesthetic is extremely important, because what we're seeing in the industry often is, here is the box you can have, or here's the box that fits in your yard, or here are the 2 boxes stacked together that you can have. And we are trying to make sure that we're allowing for much more bespoke design, while still then executing that with a standardized panelized approach. Beecher, I think you can take that home, that point.
And in that approach, it's a product design in the digital design phase and a product realization in contract manufacturers handling digital inputs of a mass customized set of serials to get to a unique serial number assemblage for each customer. That's just the type of problem that product design and manufacture folks have been solving over the last couple decades. An example that we often cite to calibrate folks is Nike ID shoes. It's a really successful mass customization. Nike doesn't create a unique assembly line for each order that comes in printed on a little ticket. They have common tooling that creates varied output to varied customer wants. And the organization of what each customer's order is and how to fulfill it is done upstream of any 2 pieces getting cut, sewn together, as the case may be in shoes. It's done in the digital design phase. So we're super focused on developing that decision-making and decision-holding capability, going so far as to use best practices from software engineering, including Git-style repository.
Yeah, how do you reach out to get customers comfortable committing early on, right? We're just kind of chatting here about known problems and unknown problems. How do you get them to commit? Jason didn't know he wanted this wall here on his custom home till he went out and saw it, but you want to do it in digital to gain a couple things, to go faster, to be more certain, to have less cost and waste. how do you play those variables out and how do you bring that into that digital world? I think going digital is key to success in many, many industries. And we're a lot of industries in different phases of that maturation. So how do we go about designing now what will be able to be grown into in the housing industry and expanded? Because we want those things to go faster, to be more cost effective and less waste. How do we get that?
Mhm. Something that we've identified doing industry benchmarking is that it's surprisingly infrequent that in a traditional architect, engineer, contractor process, that the customer gets to see high fidelity graphic assets before committing to buy. It doesn't make sense to us. So rather than that kind of 2D drawings and expecting folks to interpret plan views, we're providing high fidelity graphic assets, 3D with materiality and terrain for unflat lots in the pre-sale process. Not only is that rocket fuel to folks being excited because they can see in their mind's eye through that graphic asset how awesome it'll be to have that added living space. It also is a really high velocity path to talking about the important customer decisions on the windows, the exterior finishes, the roof pitch, the interior layout, the interior finishes, because you're talking in terms that folks make decisions on other products. Say you're configuring a Tesla Model 3 on Tesla website. You get to see what your color choices, wheel choices, interior choices would look like in real time there. I think it's super important to not overlook how important the digital design process, customer facing graphic assets are.
And I think something that Beecher really touched on there is high fidelity. And also what you didn't touch on is low barrier. And what I mean by that is it's very common to be able to kind of walk through a 3D representation of your space. Depending on the CAD program that an architect is using, it can be jerky, it can be hard to navigate. But we're not claiming that it doesn't exist. But often, and Scott, you probably experienced this 6 months to 12 months ago, if you really, really want to get a feel for the space and how the light will hit it and the finishes, you kind of have to go from CAD, and this is a process where that's kind of the digital thread is usually broken, where you go from a CAD viewpoint and then a renderer takes over, and it can be very reasonably priced. But here's another party who then renders that view. You get the view back, and that process, that can take a week, 10 days, 2 weeks. Whereas what we're trying to have just endemic to the whole design process with no extra steps or labor or parties needed is the thing is right there in digital and quite high fidelity, so that you can get a feel for what you're about to commit to.
And that handoff and the multiple parties thing is quite common actually, right on in a current home construction business. Every one of those handoffs is an opportunity for mistakes, and more people get involved and everything else. So, I mean, in the digital world and other industries, Ryan, Brett, you jump in, but it's very common that it's one core set of data. It's used throughout the entire process, and or Will, that's not new, right? It's very normal, but it's new in this industry for you.
Oh, and also let me add real quick, Scott. You remind me of something that is also, I think, extremely common, is to kind of abandon the CAD database, so to speak. I think Will makes fun of me because I don't think you call that the database anymore. That might have been a 90s thing. But the CAD representation of what you're designing, it's very common to, once you have generated the drawing set that's used not only for permitting, but for quoting and for the builder to understand what they're doing. Once you have that big roll of drawings that you see so commonly, The CAD is not kept up. And there are changes that are either they happen because of discovery, they happen because of fickle customers, they happen for 100 different reasons. But the notion for me was super uncomfortable that, oh, you're not going to go back and change the CAD, right? And so that walking away from the truth in the digital domain of what this structure is we're building was super uncomfortable for me. And what happens is once you do abandon it, you lose the ability to go back and make those changes efficiently when they do come up.
I guess a couple questions on the CAD too. I would imagine as you do more customized CAD for your customers and what they want, that's going to become a library of sorts. And eventually you're just pulling from, you're pulling, people feel like they're making a customized home, but it's really from a subset of options. And then your other point on updating the CAD, I would think, we've all done remodels and we've all tried to figure out if there's wires behind the walls and there's
or pipes
in places, right? So for me, it'd be, a lot of people are CAD savvy nowadays. If I had CAD in my home, I would pop it open and take a look around and go like, okay, I'm clear on this wall. Let's start the remodel and go from there. I'm not going to get electrocuted or hit a water line.
Beecher, I want you to really dive into the notion of the library that you're creating. But really quickly, as I'm attending weekly update meetings on certain projects, I'm seeing the piping and electrical and everything all laid out exactly as it's going to be for the first couple customers, and I'm just like, oh man, I wish I had that for my house. It's just so awesome, this notion of manifolds and wire harnesses rather than pipe and wire run, hither and yon, I guess. But Beecher, back to that library of progress, that is super, super poignant.
Mm-hmm. In the digital design space, you can resolve conflicts in minutes, hours. In the field, your conflict resolution is order of magnitude, longer duration, and customers paying for all those hours. So as much as possible, we're picking up decision-making from the field and putting it where it belongs. We're convicted it belongs. And that is in digital design phase. To know when the building for customer 1, 2, 3 is released, where each of the penetrations are for the mechanical, the electrical, the plumbing, is not only to be confident that it's not going to crash, say the M to the E and the P, but also so that the number of hours of work out in the field are the real value add, assembling through that available space, rather than say deciding where that available space should be and how to resolve that it doesn't conflict with others. With the follow-on that makes it third-party assemblable in the value add subassemblies using contract manufacturers, who as a rule have set up production supervision systems, material procurement systems, quality systems, all of which make that product strong, make that product reliable, with the added benefit that the customer has knowledge during their dwell phase of owning their home, of where these things are. They have a bill of materials of what the sourced components are. I think something really exciting about taking the amount of digital design work done in homes up 10x at Periscope, at other companies who see that it's the future as well, is those companies being able to be service providers, not only in the creation of the living space, but the owning of the living space. Reactive maintenance of a water heater is broken. Well, we know what your water heater model is. And here's where it can be sourced. Say at end of life, here's the suitable replacement that's still on spec for your house. Take it further. Preventative maintenance. Dear customer 123, your water heater is approaching end of life. Would you like it to be serviced in the next 6 weeks? Schedule here. The amount of service you can provide is really interesting in the evolution of how well described folks' homes are. I'll end with whether we call it a CAD database, PDM, or the repository. For instance, I said Git repository earlier. It's about super well organizing on Rev what will actually be built, binary objects, as well as ASCII metadata. It's much more bill of materials thinking than it is BIM thinking.
Yeah, and I think it's one other important takeaway is when you keep those lessons learned in the field and you keep your repository CAD database up to date, you essentially are improving it every generation and you're continuously improving. And when you are in a manufacturing setting, that's built into the system because the models are the gospel, they are the truth. And if you want to modify or improve for whatever reason, you do that and you learn from them. And then the next revision is an improvement. And that's how you can drive both costs down and quality up by going digital early, staying digital, and using that over and over, and using those modifications and those desires from different customers to actually improve the product and the process over time. And that's been done all over, and it seems like it's just at its infancy stages in this industry. And how exciting is that? And you think it's very real? Will, is it a real thing? Is it happening all around us, or is this a long-term, never going to happen kind of a thing?
It gives you all that revision control too, right?
Yeah. Yep.
That rev control.
Yep.
It's real and it's imperative. We're around 5 million housing units behind.
Well, and it's a really valid question to ask, Scott. Is it real? Because the 6 of us sitting around here talking about it, about the way things should be, is one thing, but there is a barrier, and that barrier is that it's hard to maintain all that detail. But to draw on another manufacturing analogy, it's hard to make a stamping die, and it's hard to make injection molding tooling, and it's hard to make tooling for casting, for example. But once you have invested and perfected that process, the number of units that you can take from the tooling you have made, it's massive. And so, we are kind of tooling up to be able to make a massive number of units, right? And we're not the only company who is enamored with this approach, but we really believe that we have super relevant experience to actually make it real.
With less than 5% of the U.S. construction market's done off-site. So, and there's been companies that have tried. So, what makes you guys confident? Don't give away any trade secrets here, but just
Right. Elsewhere in other markets, Sweden, Japan come to mind. The portion of modular is significantly higher, yet not in the American market. I think it's crucial that folks have choice in their hands. Retailing a small, medium, large that are pre-designed is a more than 100-year-old idea. I'll cite Sears Homes. That was about 100 years old, but there's even older examples. Folks have a unique vision for their living space. It's a very personal thing. And every lot is different. When you join that, there's this imperative to provide choice. Getting that experience right, the experience of choice, I believe is really crucial to make the business a success, and to scale the business is then to deliver in a supply base that level of choice successfully. The digital portion of it is super crucial to pull that off, as well as great experience in supply chain. It's a tough team to put together to understand all these things, as is the case in so many full stack problems, solving the entire value chain. Design excellence in the architecture sense, really beautiful living spaces, product design, product manufacturing, software development, supply-based work, working with great contract manufacturing partners and great manufacturing automation partners. All that needs to be in place.
And you'll notice what Will didn't say. You'll notice what Will didn't say was we are combing the planet for the best architecture and construction professionals. And that doesn't mean to say we're avoiding architecture and construction professionals, but we don't believe that that background is required, and we have firsthand experience, because when we built our teams at Tesla, we didn't say you must come from the automotive industry. In fact, very few, speaking personally of my team in the early days, very few were from the automotive industry. And it wasn't as dogmatic as, well, you know, if the current automotive industry is the answer, then we're in deep trouble. It's not at all that black and white. It's more that, well, again, speaking from personal experience, sometimes you got to go outside the automotive industry to revolutionize the automotive industry, because if you're outside the automotive industry, you don't know how stupid your ideas are. You don't know how impossible what you're suggesting is. And that's exactly what you need. You need to not know how impossible that is so that you can actually attempt it and in many cases succeed at it.
Yeah, you need the inquisitive minds that will ask the questions that no one's thought to ask because they've been embedded in the segment.
Yeah,
for so long, right?
Exactly. And there were leaders at the company who were very dependent on the time frame of the company, but were very reluctant to bring current automotive professionals in because, you know, of the negative connotation or reputation. But what I found was finding those automotive professionals who are sick and tired of being limited by this is how we do it and this is what we do and this is the way it's always been done. Finding the people who in an interview are talking about their frustration with that mentality, man, that's gold right there.
I think there's the ideas from other industries, but there's also the best practices, right? You mentioned benchmarking early on, Will, and I think there's practices that are very, very common in other industries, especially manufacturing, that are almost absent from the current construction practices. Benchmarking, waste tracking, continuous improvement, and best practices. All of those things. Can you just speak a little bit about how some of those common manufacturing things can just bring improvements, and to what order of magnitude and where they might be applied in the housing industry?
I'll start with the statement that we firmly believe in here at Periscope, which is that building materials currently are performant. The raw materials, they work. Weather barriers work. Engineered wood succeeds structurally. Simpson brackets hold successfully. Yet the lack of, say, memory in an organization, project to project, in current norms is pretty striking, and often results in these raw materials being ordered and delivered to site and pulled off trucks and there on a pallet, and all the conversion of that raw material to finished will be in lightly supervised ways that isn't prescribed on a drawing set. Neither the planning nor the building set says how long to cut each thing and say the order of operations to follow. Yet in manufacturing, you absolutely have an operation sequence with a process that goes from raw materials as inputs through the value adding, where you have inspections throughout, you have control parameters, you have process limits that are inside spec limits. You even measure in factories how successful, how frequent you are inside your process limits, where your nominals are. You tune processes to shift the nominals inside control limits. That's absent today. But what a benefit to productivity introducing that in homes is.
Mhm.
We have system upon system to build that look more like product design and manufacture than home building today. So we're pulling lots of best practices from
Can you talk
products.
about waste and sustainability and mix that in there as well?
Absolutely. The reduction of waste is a huge part of 21st century manufacturing. It's the right thing to do for the sustainability of all of us living here on Earth. Talking to two folks who were a decade at Tesla, sustainability is in the DNA of how we approach the problem. And for all that raw material that comes in the back door, the cutoffs, the trim pieces that don't make it into the product going out the front door, go to the dump. And that's missed opportunity. So for an example of weather barrier, simply prescribing how many rolls and how they're going to be cut to go on to, in Periscope's case, panels. We're conscious of minimizing that weather barrier in the trash can waste percentage. And we'll be continually looking for how to drive that waste percentage down, as we did so many different aspects of the bill of materials for manufacture versus the bill of materials from engineering at Tesla.
So without even introducing new materials, you can get more sustainable by wasting less, applying more. Then there's a broad opportunity to open up all new material choices and everything else, as you mentioned. So I think there's a myriad of stories about waste from job sites, right, Jason? You have a good passionate argument there. But
Yeah, well, I walk my job site every evening, and I'll sometimes go get the pickup and load up some plywood cutoffs that are in the bin, inch and
every
an eighth.
builder listening right now just went, oh, you're one of those guys, right?
Hey, inch and an eighth tongue and groove plywood, I don't even want to know what I paid for a sheet of it on that job site. And this is again not because my builder is wasteful and hates trees. It's because there is not it is very, very hard to order. You definitely don't want to under order, because now you've got people standing around, waiting on materials. The other subtlety is that job to job synergy of economy doesn't exist, because their jobs, my builders' jobs, are spread throughout the Bay Area. And so are they going to try to truck material from one job to the other? How are they going to account for all of that? It's just the process does not lend itself to all of these things that you can step back and go, oh, well, what if we backed up and made these efficient moves endemic to the process, like we talked about earlier. And yeah, I'm squirreling away material, not because I have any purpose for it, but the notion of it just getting chopped up or ground up or not used again is painful to me. And so as a result, maybe I'm creating termite nests throughout my current yard because I got cutoffs stacked up. But what I want is to have an industry where you just don't see so much waste.
Yeah, so there's definitely a short-term project-based problem with waste and planning optimization, then you spread it across multiple units inside a facility. You pick up some gains there. Is there opportunities to then change complete building practices and a long-term vision? Just dream out if you applied manufacturing practices to the current material choices, but then you get into building codes, and I know it's a tangled up mess, so you guys have been wrestling with short-term, but then you have long-term vision. So paint a picture for us there once.
Beecher, I've got a really quick one before you go. Again, drawing from industry, when you CNC machine any material, often, whether it be in prototyping or even in production, often your finished product will be less material than the chips that it took to make it, right? Yeah. And in a machine shop, on any machine shop, they are binning the aluminum chips with, and separately from the steel, both stainless and non-stainless. They're binning the copper ones, even, those are even more valuable if there's copper being processed. Well, just as simple as, okay, let's just take the waste, just like you said, Scott, even with current materials, if you can waste less, that's a win. Well, even with the same amount of waste, if you can send those waste streams to the best place they can go, there's a win, right? Will and I worked so much. I mean, in the early days, Will and I, we didn't have a huge EH&S department to figure out where we were going to throw away stuff. And that was Will and me figuring out a company to call, and then figuring out where to put the bins that the company to call came and gave us, figuring out who's going to go open the roll-up door so they could take it away and dispose of it responsibly. And, to my horror, sometimes the most responsible disposal was incineration. And I was like, really? Wait, but it's not incinerate it back in the back 40, it's incinerate in a controlled environment and recoup the heat. So anyway, if you can, again, this is kind of a common theme, if you can really think upstream to how to do things more efficiently, even with the current materials, even with current parameters, there are many wins. Beecher, you had one.
Been to a pallet factory and they made wood chips out of the old expired pallet boards. So they'd wood chip them and dye them different colors. And I don't know, I just hear you collecting your 2x4s and OSB, and I feel like there may be accessories market that you guys can get in for matching pet homes to your ADU.
Yeah, exactly.
I think any great waste stream divergence policy is built on, in order, the principles of reduce, reuse, recycle, where weight reduction, the number of atoms we're shipping out to the field reduction, is really exciting part of growth and scale. Take the statement that we hold true that engineered wood is performant today. Well, you still have to cut a bunch of features into it. Yet Weyerhaeuser is forming the 11 7/8 by 3.5. And there's opportunity to drive features into that very forming process, the compression process, rather than features to be exclusively material removal. The Simpson bracket I described earlier is approved through a number of bodies to be usable in International Building Code. California Residential Code, here where we're operating, is pursuant to that. Seeking approvals for further interface pieces, I think, is an exciting part of growth through time. The kind of extra raw material that is what our raw incoming parts are made from, being examined and assembled differently, is a really exciting part of growth phase. And it means fewer atoms not ending up in customers' homes. I'll note that many a home has more mass in its foundation than in the home people interact with above the sill. And not only are there more atoms in the foundation, those atoms released a bunch of CO2 because as a rule, they're made of concrete. So alternate materials in foundations and reduction of foundation weight through a very systemic approach. Let me say it differently, through a very systematized approach to solving the building across architecture, structural engineering, civil engineering, and geotechnical engineering. I think can do a lot of weight optimization. We're having a number of convos with folks working on carbon neutral and even carbon sequestering concrete. We're looking forward to incorporating those materials where atom for atom, can we use an innovative material as well as reducing atom count.
Yeah, and Will, you mentioned the pushing upstream of features in these manufactured products from the current building industry. It is being done. We're not talking about these ideas as though they are epiphanies that only we have thought of. There are, I believe it was Weyerhaeuser on my site as well, where they have these OSB floor joists, which is a piece of OSB and lumber on the top and bottom. And those floor joists have knockouts, which was awesome. Just like an electrical panel, right? Where they have I don't remember exactly the manufacturing process, but semi-perforated or semi-drilled, where an electrician or a plumber can go up there and instead of lugging a drill and a speed bore or whatever his or her favorite tool is, just knock it out with a hammer. And I was like, wow, this is like a glimmer of hope here, like revolutionizing these products that go into the building. The industry has an appetite for it, and there is precedent that it is being done. We think that we, through just taking it steps further, could drive a ton of those innovations.
Yeah. What's the new guy supposed to work on though? When I worked for electrician, that was, that's where I got put. Drill those holes, right?
Right.
This is what we say. This is what we say every time we would bring a robotic process online, and people are like, well, there goes my job. What, am I fired? And it's like, no, absolutely. You will be deployed on something where your skill set is better used.
Yeah, I'm going to transition here, and we wanted to call this a fireside chat, and hopefully everybody listening can tell we're a bunch of engineering guys. We love sitting around chatting about problems and stuff. So, when we do that, we get started down some path, and all of a sudden we go, but that's never going to change. This is a sacred cow of the industry. We can't change this. So, what are some of the times where we've been sitting around thinking about, boy, we could just do this? But it's a sacred cow. Just give us a couple of cool stories or ideas that we want to tackle, but you kind of put them on the back burner because they're really hard, or they're sacred cows, whatever word you want to pick. And how do you go about that in other industries?
I think two sacred cows that Periscope are really challenging in industry are, well, if you're going to be modular, you have to build your own factory and do it all yourself. The other, and we'll get back to the first, but the other is that the industry players will stay in their comfort zones and their business models. Consolidation of what now is many, many very small businesses working on slices of the pie into an organization that makes a system solution in digital design phase prescribes that there is in-house architect as a competency valued in its contribution to the system solution alongside in-house structural engineering. Inside the team is also the civil, the geotech. And I think that's incredibly exciting, that more teamwork across those disciplines, which more closely mirrors a product engineering team than the way the construction industry currently looks is going to be really valuable to growth. Right now, to build a single family home, folks experience lots of professionals they have to work with. Most folks doing new single family home construction have to learn the difference between a geotechnical and a civil engineer. Yet you can buy the best car on the market without learning the difference between a DVT and an NVH engineer. But both of those types of engineering did contribute to it. And those are real 3-letter acronyms in the automotive industry, not just made up. So challenge the norms of how the players contain role and what those very business models are. Back to building factory, there's so much capability in the automotive tier 1, tier 2 supply base and the cabinet industry that these are going to be incredible contract manufacturers for great full stack companies solving customers' whole problems. Particularly the way cabinet as a whole industry really got 20 plus years ago, that engineered woods and robotic tooling are the path forward. That's rocket fuel.
And you'll notice that Beecher didn't say, yeah, here's what we do. We get rid of architects and construction people. It's not about that at all. That's as myopic as saying, like I said earlier, when you put a robot on the production line, you have to fire 4 people. That's ridiculous. What's really exciting is really diving into how those professionals are working and the tools they're using, and super importantly, how they interact with each other, right?
Yeah, it sounds like one of the barriers you guys have discovered is that communication flow. Like when you do the handoff and you drop the baton, just because there's so many different disciplines that need to come to bear to facilitate the home, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and say in the pursuit of designing a racehorse, a committee makes a camel. I believe comes to bear too often in going between 5 and 10 professional service providers. Then in the field, it's not unusual to have 10 to 20 trades. Mm-hmm. To make more to make tighter system level solutions, increase the teamwork in order of magnitude,
and decrease the serial nature of construction today is another killer. I mean, you know, the old the tile guy didn't show up, so the painter can't do this, and, you know, whatever. You can make that chain with 8 different trades on a given day. It's all a chain link, and it's only as strong as the weakest one, or the one that doesn't show up, right? And so again, I'm beating this horse, but it's so important not to take away. Yeah, Jason hates electricians, painters, and tile guys. That's not what I'm saying. It's just how dependent we are on their individual work coming in just at the right time. It's just a killer.
And it ties back to one of our first topics about going digital and making that plan in the digital world more complete, so it can be planned out, so it can be outsourced and built outside by a contract manufacturer, someone who specializes in that and has dedicated equipment. And then it becomes optimized and the flow is better. The speed, as you allude to, the serialness slows everything down. You start things going because they were well planned up front in the digital world. They're able to be parallel manufactured and brought together at the end. And I think there's an underlying thing there that it eliminates waste, all the things we talked about, but it also is speed to market. From when I decide I want to build a house, I find a spot, or I want to acquire an ADU, I've decided I want it. Now I'm just waiting, right? And it's an anxious time. So the sooner you can go through that digital process and then deliver a product, customer satisfaction goes up. You get to utilize the product sooner and you enjoy it more than if you have to wait a year. So that resiliency in the process of being digital and planning more, I think really has multiple goals. And what about the resiliency in the supply chain now? It's just one of those painful things right now. And if you have that better, is there a feeling there that speed could be better, or even so we're waiting on materials now, there's nothing we can do? What's the last topic there?
Great supply chain management works not just in the dollar domain, but in the lead time domain.
Yeah.
And building up the global supply chain to optimize time to deliver and make sure that orders are placed conscious of the time to deliver is part of what we're building here at Periscope. For as many surprise 16-week lead times as there may be in a project, there's also quite a few we forgot to order that from the team working on traditional projects. When you have great digital design organization, you can also do great digital organization. When you have great digital design organization, you can also have great digital team organization. The role that is so frequent in product development, engineering project manager, program management is part of what we're building here. Make sure that we're flowing through each customer's project, hitting those orders at the right time.
Are you finding that you're having to limit customization? I know earlier you had kind of spoke on how customization really is kind of what people like to grab hold of most, and it kind of really lets them feel like their product is unique. You're taking care of them. It's really theirs that they're going after, right? Are you finding that there's a need to limit customization at all, so you don't hinder your ability to exercise best practices and maybe create excess waste if it's something brand new that your team is seeing? Again, kind of going back to that, if somebody doesn't communicate what the problem was, in the drawing package maybe that they received, they didn't communicate that back. We've seen instances where the variants become too much and they're like, well, I'm not going to see this one for another 2 years, so I'm not even going to communicate this and throw it to the side. And then, it kind of becomes a problem. But so I guess just kind of asking the question, how do you limit customization a bit in this industry?
The opportunity to create unique footprints for each customer, because the way that that's realized is unitized, if you will, in panels. The increase of the bounding dimensions is a matter of adding panels. The structural load being distributed successfully, we've not yet broken the SKUs that we're working with in the ADU form factor. I think an interesting point is when pushing into extents greater than 30 feet for a wall dimension, the upsizing of the structure will necessitate the addition of SKUs to successfully handle loads across those distances. And we're tracking that, say, the rough homes proliferation of SKUs is roughly the metric that you want to keep an eye on for whether things are pushing outside the sweet spot for efficiency and time to deliver, quality and cost in offsite manufacture. In finish, say expressed in internal materials, external material, electrical finish items, and plumbing fixtures, those we're pulling from what great architects in our extended team have had lots of customers extremely happy with in recent years. And we're finding that those prospective customers are responding to super well. And
Will, I got to throw in the geek definition card, because when I'm listening and I hear number of SKUs, that means how far a SKU is something. So can you,
Oh.
right?
The,
It's one of those things we got to watch when we use words and think about
Yeah.
it, right? So just flesh that out real fast.
I was thinking the MEP maybe we should describe too at some point. Mechanical, electrical
SKU.
power stuff, right?
We need a
The
glossary.
industry lingo. You're already in it, Will.
For a given part number from a given manufacturer, that is a unique SKU. Think of it as the barcode that gets scanned at checkout.
Stands
Yeah.
for stock
Different product.
keeping units.
Yep, I was just gonna ask if anybody knew the definition of SKU, and Jason wins the prize. Ding, ding. All right.
So the barbecue chips are a different SKU than the Cool Ranch.
As a non-engineer, that's exactly where my mind went. I was in my college days.
Define MEP, Beecher.
Mechanical, electrical, plumbing.
Yeah.
The
Pipes and wires.
the pipes, wires, and heating, venting, and air conditioning that makes the raw structure serve the needs of the occupants.
Great. We've gone a little bit over. Thank you all for taking the time to talk. If there's any last thoughts, we certainly want to hear them, but I want to be conscious of everyone's time here. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.